Thank you for watching. Today we're going to have a look at I think the 4 most sold trail trucks that are out at the moment. And that is in no particular order: the Vaterra, or I just do them from left to right or right to left for you. The Vaterra Ascender, this is the Axial SCX102 version 2, the Traxxas TRX4 and the HPI Venture. Now all of these trucks have their pluses and their minuses, or their positives and their negatives. And I'm not by any means gonna try and tell you and steer you in a certain direction on what truck you should buy, because I mean it's your money and I really don't care. And that's like kind of like me telling you what pizza to order. I mean, everybody has a different taste. We're all looking for something else, and I just want to sort of like point out what the similarities are, but also what the differences are. Now let's start off with the bodies and the way that these trucks look when you take them out of the box. So we're going to assume that you do not buy them as ready to run. I'm pretty sure that the Traxxas TRX4 is going to be released as a kit. The HPI Venture will also be released as a kit. The Vaterra Ascender is already available as a kit. And this is in fact the kit version of the Axial SCX102 version 2. So we're not going to look at steering servos and all that. But if you are interested in that, I can tell you right from the get-go that all of the steering servos in all of these trucks are due to be replaced, because I don't like any of them. The HPI is really a joke when it comes to the steering servo. So is the Traxxas TRX4. They're really not up to par. The Vaterra Ascender in stock form sort of like handles okay with the stock steering servo, but what I did notice when I took it out on the camping trails over at Team K&K was that it started to brown out after about 20 minutes, which is not a good deal. And then you have, of course, the tactic servo that you find in a ready-to-run SCX102. I'm still running it in mine, but by no means is it capable. It's almost like an ongoing joke at the moment to see when it will actually catch fire, or sort of like throw in the towel because it just had enough. Same with radio systems. I mean, if you buy these ready to run, they all come with pretty okay radio systems. So the Vaterra comes with, from the top of my head, a is it a DX2E Spectrum? This one comes with a tactic radio, nothing wrong with it. This one comes with that weird radio with all the switches and flip buttons. Also not a bad radio. And this one comes with the TF40, which is also not a bad radio. But this is not an electronics comparison. So we're going to just have a look at the chassis, the axles, and basically what you get in the box. They all look good out of the box, I must say. So they're all nailing what these bodies should look like. The only thing is that in finishing them up, it can go horribly wrong, like in Traxxas' case with these windows. Now I do think that they make up for it by adding a whole lot of accessories right out of the box. So you get like the snorkel, the roof rack, the fender flares, some molded plastics in the front. In the back you have the spare tire carrier, some jerry cans, rock jack, and all of that stuff. That's very complete, and that's also something that you don't find on any of the other trucks. The Vaterra just looks really good because they really nailed the shape of that Bronco body. I think that the Jeep also looks really good. It comes with all those door handles, the mirrors, that grill section, and even like that on the tailgate there's like a piece of plastic. So yeah, none of these trucks look bad. HPI nailed it with some mirrors, some fenders that look like they're actually bolt-ons, but they're not. So they did a nice job finishing that. There's a nice roof rack going on and a pretty cool spare tire carrier. Another thing that I don't want to consider in this comparison are wheels and tires. The only set of wheels, or the only set of tires that I'm actually still using, are the BF Goodrich tires that came with the Axial, are currently sitting on the Vaterra. So all of that stuff has been changed out, swapped around. And I also don't want to talk about any of those things in this video. There's a whole lot of stuff that I've so far been talking about that I promised not to talk about. Yeah, let's start off with the axles. If you look at the steering, all of these companies have a different philosophy when it comes to steering. I think the biggest plus on the Vaterra is how short the wheelbase actually is. Gives you a lot of throw, but it's like imaginary throw on the steering. Just because the wheelbase is so short, it makes that you can get around the corner well, a lot easier than you would with a longer frame. The Traxxas has a pretty good steering going on, but it does not compare to the Axial SCX102 version 2, because when you look at the actual steering angle, they really nailed it with this truck. I think an interesting part of the steering engineering on the HPI Venture is the behind the axle steering. So actually the steering hubs, they're connected behind the axle instead of in front, which you see in all of the other trucks. So that gives you one less thing that you can actually get hung up on. They also have a really interesting servo saver. I did not mention it in my unboxing, but it is actually there. I noticed that when I changed out the steering servo on it for a ProTek one. So they all have like something different going on. I think Vaterra was the first to really shrink that pumpkin on an axle. So when they released the Ascender, it was a big difference with the first version of the Axial SCX102, which had a quite big pumpkin going on. Axial, I think, took note, made the pumpkin a whole lot smaller on the SCX102 version 2, but also made a non-centered pinion. So the pinion actually sits a lot higher. It has helical gears. There's a lot of great engineering going on actually in these axles. There's a lot of over-engineering, I'd say, going on in the Traxxas axles. They're portals. If you're not familiar with what a portal is, I can of course make a 17-minute video to explain you all the ins and the outs of the engineering of a portal axle, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to say where the drive shaft actually comes out. There's a step down with some gears, which ensures that your wheel actually connects a whole lot lower than the center of that axle. Now that has some benefits and also some negatives to it. I think the negatives are that it's a whole lot of extra shit that can break. And it was no different in my TRX4, because I managed to pop a drive shaft right away on the second run, so I'm not too impressed with that. People say that that's a freak accident, so I'm going to believe them for now and give this car a really fair shot. Another thing that you find with a portal axle is you get a lot more clearance, so you can see that there's a lot more room going on underneath the pumpkin. A negative aspect of that is that the whole center of gravity of the car sits a lot higher as well. Now, if you lower it a tiny bit, you can get like a lot more straightness out of your drivetrain, which is good. So yeah, again, you know, it's like a bit of a coin toss on what you want. What I really like in the HPI Venture is the weight of the axles, and that's also where it sort of like sets itself apart from the competition. There's a lot of cast aluminum parts going on. Those link mounts and those diff covers, they're all cast aluminum, and they really make the car feel planted. So that was something that struck me right out of the box, that this car is very capable out of the box actually. Has a really nice center of gravity. The pumpkins are not over dimensioned, and yeah, so far it has been performing great. I haven't really beaten the snot out of it yet, but so far so good. So yeah, it's really, do you want to have something that's simple, short wheelbase, for example, go for the Vaterra. If you want to have a lot of steering throw and some great engineering and also some proven durability, go for the Axial. If you want to have something that's completely next level in engineering and has like a portal axle going on, go for the TRX4. And if you want to have something that's nice and weighted and I don't know, performs good out of the box, go with the HPI Venture. Yeah, frame rails. Well, there's a lot of different layouts going on over here, so I'll just take the bodies off and give you a bit of a closer look. So every company has a different philosophy on what a truck should do, and also on how they should perform, and where well, where all of the electronics are going to be placed, where the transmission cases are going to be placed, and those type of things. Now, you will immediately see that in all of these trucks, the Traxxas by far is the busiest when it comes to layout. If we start with, for example, battery placement, you'll see that the Vaterra has, and this is I think really a topic of discussion, Vaterra has that battery tray which actually articulates with the front axle. I don't think that that's a bad thing. I know that a lot of people modify that right out of the box. I'm not one of those people, because I actually like the idea of having the extra weight of a battery sitting on the front axle and just weighing it down a tiny bit. There's a ton of options that you can buy to make your axles heavier. You can, for example, go for a fully machined aluminum axle, such as Vanquish offers, or you can insert some beef tubes, or you can do both, I think. to really weigh it down. But this is actually, I like this. This is a smart idea. What Axial did is they took the battery tray, really placed it up front. So you can run a big pack battery in here. Keeps it between those front shock towers, sits right next to the steering servo. I'll take the HPI first. The HPI has a battery tray that's been, I think, deemed one of the negative points of this platform. I don't think that it's that big of a deal though. So the battery tray sits up pretty high between the rear shock hoops. And it's a part of the ladder frame construction. So if you would take it away, you end up with a car that's super floppy. So I'm waiting for a company to come out with some sort of insert that you can put between those shock hoops, and that would allow you to drop the battery down, sort of like on the frame rails over here behind the transfer case, thus solving that problem. Solving the problem of having like a high center of gravity battery is a lot more complicated with the Traxxas TRX4. There's such an amount of stuff going on engineering wise. They got a 2-speed transmission, they got the lockable diffs front and back, that there's really not a great way to drop this down. I do know that I think it was Bauhaus RC as a solution for that, that's available through Shapeways. So one may look into that, because I'm not really comfortable with the battery sitting this high, considering that there's already a ton of stuff going on in a truck that in addition sits on portals. And has the heaviest body of all of them. So yeah, I'll have to give it, when it comes to innovation, I'll give it to the Vaterra. Well, I've never had any problems with the Axial SCX102. The HPI needs some work, but is easily solved. And then the Traxxas is a tiny bit of a headache. Not completely impossible, but not the best setup right out of the box either. Another thing that you can see is that all these companies have a different philosophy when it comes to motor and ESC placement, receiver placement, that type of stuff. And we'll start off with the Vaterra Ascender, where the receiver box sits all the way in the back. Now I mounted, this is a Mamba Micro X ESC. I mounted that one on a separate piece of Lexan that I actually had to make myself, right in front of that receiver box, and then the motor and the whole transfer case, or the transmission, I should say, sits very much centered, but also as low as you can get it. Now the kit version, this is the kit version of the Axial SCX102, comes with like a newer style transmission, which I'm not a big fan of. I actually prefer the old style SCX10 transmission, which you would find in the ready to run. Yeah, well, the TRX4, I think you can tell immediately that it's a bit of a nightmare to work on, with the battery tray sitting right on top of the transmission case. Wasn't too impressed with the ability to actually set the mesh on the pinion either when I changed out the motor. If you're wondering, I'm running Slate, Castle Slate motors, so these are all 1406 cans, running those in all of my trucks. In the Vaterra I'm running a 1900, I'm running a 2280 in the SCX10, running a 2280 in the TRX4, and I'm running a 2850 in the HPI Venture. I think transmission wise the HPI Venture has them all sort of beat, because this has a really nice layout. So everything sits up front. You got the motor and the transmission sitting right between the shock towers next to the steering servo, the receiver box right behind that, and then behind that a place where you can mount your ESC. This is like an immediate drop down. So from where that behind the axle steering sort of goes, and all the room that it needs, they really tucked it down as far as possible, and from there on down it's a direct drop down with some Savox XS gearing to eventually come out into this this drive shaft that then goes to the transfer case. Another interesting thing is that you can adjust your slipper clutch right on the back over there without having to remove a cover or anything. So I'm really impressed with what they did in terms of their transmission and the motor placement and whatnot. It's all really nice, very compact, and I'm a big fan of what HPI did there. Let's see, when it comes to shocks, the Vaterra shocks are plastic bodies. You got to keep in mind there's some price differences going on between these cars. So I think the Vaterra comes in the cheapest, then closely followed by, I think at the moment, the Axial SCX10, closely followed then by the HPI, and the TRX4 is by far the most expensive, but it also packs the most features. But whether you want to have those or not, that's of course up to you. Shocks, plastic body shocks on the Vaterra. Not very impressed with them, but they're an easy fix, of course. The SCX102 shocks, the ones that you find in the kit, I'm not a big fan of those either. Assembling them is a tiny bit of a pain. They're Icon licensed shocks. They have aluminum shock bodies, faux piggybacks. But to get them to operate really smooth, you need to put in a lot of work to get them tuned to the point where you want to have them. Now, for me, how to test shocks, that's actually a pretty funny story, which I will get into right after I do these last two. The Traxxas shocks, they're pretty stiff. I think once I put some more runtime on it, they will sort of like, I don't know, break loose a tiny bit. Aluminum bodied, aluminum adjustment rings, really nice. They're very smooth. Although the finish on the HPIs is a bit more, well, I'd say coarse than you would find them on the Traxxas. These are my preferred shocks. They're dual rate. So they got like a tiny spring going on in the top and then a bigger spring in the bottom. They're a tiny bit of a bigger bore. They're still aluminum bodies, but right out of the box they've been awesome. I put about a day of runtime on this truck so far, and they've really broken in nicely, and they perform as they should. For me, how to test the capability of a shock and if I actually like what they do, is I take the wheels off the truck, put the body on there, pull a t-shirt around it, throw it in a suitcase, check it, like air flights, check it. So I fly a lot, and I fly a lot with all of my trucks as well. And what happens when the cabin pressure sort of changes when you check your luggage is that could, for example, explode a LiPo battery, but it can also completely deflate a shock when you have a shock that doesn't seal up completely. So with all of the axial shocks, I have had problems in the past. Even with some of the Proline shocks, I've had some problems. I have not seen a single drop of shock fluid leak from the HPI Venture, which I was expecting because it's been sort of like a recurring problem. And well, in case of the HPI Venture, I was pleasantly surprised to see that not a single drop of shock fluid actually was lost when I landed and took this car out of my suitcase. Bumper wise, I think well, both Vaterra and Axial did a pretty nice job with the bumpers. So did Traxxas, but I mean, you need to perhaps be a fan of this faux winch setup going on. This is a bit more, I'd say, toy grade than the bumpers that you would find on whether that be the Vaterra or the Axial. And I think that HPI again nailed it with the shape of the bumper on that cruiser. Nicely detailed, has that those, well, they're plastic, but it has those rings or D-links going on, whatever you want to call them. It still has the room for you to mount a winch if you choose to do so, and I think with the brush guard combined with that body, they got something that looks really nice. Now there's also, when it comes to, for example, rock sliders, these companies all have different philosophies. Apparently in this ready-to-run version of the Bronco, Vaterra is under the impression that you don't really need them at all. The axial ones, they work, but they do warp. So when you sort of like, when you build the kit, for example, you can tell that this one is wonky as can be. Traxxas did a great job, I think, by having sort of like a slot in which you can push the body down and having it completely molded in. It's still adjustable, but also with what they did with the inner fenders, that's just all really cool, but you do pay for it. And I think that the rock sliders on the HPI Venture, they look good, they feel a lot beefier than the ones that you would find on your Axial. So yeah, they also, I think, did a great job over there. Now, there's no best or worst in this case. They all have a chassis mounted steering servo. Now how that's oriented is all a tiny bit different. There's a lot of similarities going on, I think, between the Axial and the HPI over there. Well, I hope that this gives you a tiny bit of insight on what's actually going on with these trucks and what the strong points and the weak points might be. So, well, it all depends on, do you want to have like a lot of steering throw, or perhaps you're just a Bronco fan and you want to have a Vaterra, or perhaps you're a big Defender fan and you want to have the Traxxas. Yeah, so there's plenty of options out there. I'm really happy to see a lot of new players come into this crawling and trail trucking market. I think the more options the better, and it will also grow the entire community and bring more people into the hobby. Traxxas, of course, being the most important player there. They've always been sort of like a go fast brand, with their slogan also being the fastest brand in RC. And to see them slowing down a tiny bit and becoming also one of the slower brands in RC, I think they're rapidly sort of like convincing people that trail trucking can be fun. So in those terms, I really respect their decision to launch this TRX4. Axial, of course, has been around for ages with their SCX10 vehicle, but also really back in the day with the AX10, and they've created a huge following and something that also sort of like inspired an entire community to come together every year and celebrate the brand at Axial Fest. And that is, I think, also a key feature on choosing which truck to go for. Now there aren't any Vaterra Fests so far, and there's no Traxxas TRX4 Fest. And I hope that companies will sort of like start doing that again, because back in the day at HPI I had a lot of fun going to their endurance cups. I think that's a huge part of not just trail trucking but RC in general, is meeting new people and hanging out, making new friends, having fun, hitting the trails together. Now you can argue perhaps that Axial Fest is too narrow-minded. There's because of course it's Axial Fest, so they only allow axial vehicles. Now next year there is going to be an option for those of us who just want to get together with whatever we run. It's Run What You Bring at Parker Fest next year. There's going to be several events. I hope to be able to attend 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 of those as well, just to be able to meet up and hang out with as many people as possible, because to me that's what makes this a great hobby. So yeah, there's a lot of options out there, a lot of cool options. There's no bad cars here whatsoever, and they're all worth checking out. If you have the budget, I would recommend, like me, getting them all, just because you never have enough trail trucks, I think, at least, and it's just fun to be able to take something different out on the trails. They all behave a tiny bit differently, but I think all of them have enough features for you to actually appreciate them and yeah, sort of value them for what they are. Hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions or comments, I'm pretty sure I skipped a whole lot of stuff as well. Again, don't leave those spiteful fanboy bullshit comments, because I'm not I'm not in the mood for those. But if you have any comments that do matter, leave them in the comments box. If you have not subscribed yet, please do. No Patreon, no GoFundMe, no PayPal bullshit over on this channel. You'll never see that, because my hobby is not your problem. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to press the like button. That greatly helps. Well, if you want to have more information about any of these trucks, go check out the links in the description box. I will also put links to some of the parts that you see over here, which are of course not included when you buy the truck bone stock. So for example, some of the parts over here, I've already addressed that in the upgrade video about the HPI Venture. RC4WD drive, winch, pitbull tires, Vanquish rims, Castle Mamba X with 2850 Slate motor, ProTek servo. You can find all of those products over at Amain Hobbies. Now some of the parts that you see over here come from RC Mart. So these Vanquish rims, these are, I believe, the bullies. Those I got from RC Mart. There will be a ton of shapeways parts as well from Night Customs that I will be adding to this truck, along with a clearer body with a different paint scheme. And let's see, some of the stuff that you see on this Axial SCX10 version 2 are, for example, the Proline rims. These are aluminum rims, and you can find those on the Proline Racing website. If you use the code HemiStorm10, you will get an additional 10% discount, so that's pretty useful. I hope you can actually put that to some good use, or pass it around to your friends if they are interested in getting some Proline gear. And for this Vaterra Ascender, I used a set of G-Made wheels, which I actually got at RC Mart. So I will also make sure that there's a link to those in the video description, so you can check those out in case you are interested. Well, there was a whole lot to talk about. Thank you so much for watching and sticking it out with me. I'm not even sure if you say it like that, but thank you for watching the entire video if you made it this far, and I hope to see you around in the next one. Take care, bye-bye.
Back on.